All right, so hello everyone again. Thank you for joining us for this bilingual conversation about mental health. I hope you grabbed your beverage of choice, whether it's coffee, water, or a little wine, and you're ready to discuss with us. But again, my name is Miriam Campos with the Oklahoma City Latino Young Professional Group, and we are going to have a conversation with our friend Homero Rivera. Um, we had we heard a lot from you, and so we felt like it was really important to talk about this, but it's only going to be a start. There's a lot that comes with this topic, so we are just going to introduce this conversation today and hope that we can continue the discussion. So I want to welcome our friend, and I want to tell you a little bit about him really quick. He is a licensed professional therapist who specializes in depression, anxiety, trauma, domestic violence, and anger. And so he is definitely well suited to have this conversation with us. But also, he is an entrepreneur, so he does a lot more than just be a therapist. So. Hi, Homero. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Thank you for inviting me, Miriam, and hi to everybody. We're doing good.
Yeah.
We need to get this
So,
started.
Homero, thank you again for joining us for this conversation. And I'd like to just start us off by you telling us a little bit about yourself so we can get to know you, where you grew up. I know you've done a few trips, but let's get to know you.
All right. Yes, my name is Homero Rivera. I was born in a small town in Mexico. Up until I was 8 years old. Then I moved to Washington, the Washington, D.C. metro area. And that's where I kind of grew up. That's where I learned English. And I went to elementary school, middle school, and high school. Then in the year 2000, I moved to Oklahoma City. And I've been here since. I started going to school back in 2014. I got my bachelor's in 2015, I'm sorry. Um, I've been practicing counseling for several years now. After my bachelor's, I went to SNU. That's where I got my master's back in 17. Yeah. My goal right now is to go into my doctorate program. So hopefully within a year and a half, I'll start that because I know that's going to be a pretty intense journey. So I got to be mentally prepared for that.
Yeah.
And I'm loving what I'm doing. I feel very passionate about it. So I'm here to help and spread what I've learned.
So I do have to say, though, we have several people from SNU, and I'm also an SNU alumni. So shout out to Rocio, Laura, and everybody else who is commenting. So you have a lot of supporters here. So, Homero, tell us and the group what inspired you to become a licensed professional therapist? Because I know that didn't just happen. Something had to lead you there.
Yeah, no. What really started all of this was that I got out of a really bad relationship, and I had a friend who recommended me to go into therapy, and like almost all of our culture, the Hispanic culture, I was kind of like persistent about it, and I was like, no, I don't think I'm good. But then I finally took the step, and I went into therapy, and I felt very relieved because it wasn't just my relationship that got me there. I think it was a lot of childhood trauma, which is one of the things that have made me stay in where I'm at and promote mental health, because I think a lot of us have gone through that. So after that, I was very interested and I'm very, very intrigued to learn more about it. And my therapist now is my mentor. He was like, well, this is what you got to do. I started doing it. He wasn't too sure about it. He was like, are you sure about this? But yeah, I pushed myself, and then I finally got through my master's and did all the training and everything. And that's where I am right now. So I think it was a combination of several things that got me to be where I'm at.
And I'm sure a lot of people are probably going to be able to relate with what you said about having childhood trauma. There's a lot of things that we all carry that we don't realize as we are growing up. So I definitely feel like our experiences lead us into our future careers without even realizing. But just so people can get an idea of, you mentioned your profession, but can you give us some examples of what exactly you specialize in?
Yes. So my main focus is trauma, and then we have another session which is the depression, anxiety, and the stress. Those three things are like my main focus. I love doing that because it kind of like accentuates the self-awareness part of ourselves, and that's where I really push my clients to go through. Self-awareness, as human beings or as adults, we think like we know each other very well, but once we go deep into ourselves, I don't think we know ourselves the way we should. So I like to push into that and kind of like get everybody to explore themselves and get to know themselves, as far as in like, why do I do the things I do and why do I feel the way I feel.
Interesting. I'm sure we all ask each other that same question a lot.
In therapy, I do ask, I always tell in the first session that I'm going to be asking the question why a lot, because we tend to just answer the question as in like, for instance, they ask you, oh, so why do you do that? And the first response is because I don't know, or because I like it. And my goal is to go deeper than that, and to really get the reason behind it, so that way you understand yourself better and move on in life, and making the decisions a lot more aware of why is it that you're doing the things you're doing.
Now, is there a specific age group that you kind of focus on, or do you kind of work with all ages?
I work with all ages, but my main caseload is teenagers. I enjoy working with teenagers a lot because I feel like right now they're at kind of like at the sponge stage where they just pick up everything and they're trying to understand. First of all, they're trying to figure themselves out, and then so it's a very interesting stage where you can just go in and kind of not mold them, but show them the different options that there are, um, not just have them kind of like be on their own, or not have the support that they need. So I want
Yeah.
to kind of be like, not holding their hand either, but kind of showing them, hey, there's this whole spectrum of options that you can choose from and make the best decision out of it.
Yeah. Well, we've gotten to know a little bit about you, and there's a lot that we want to cover tonight. So I think we should just jump right in. Um, let's talk mental health.
Let's
um,
go.
what was that?
I said, let's go.
Let's do this. All right. So again, so we may not cover everything, but this is definitely going to be important for you guys to also provide your feedback if you have any questions throughout. But let's talk about the cultural stigmas associated with mental health and in the Latino community. I know we talked a lot about this prior to this kind of preparing, and so um, let's just jump right in. What are your thoughts on this whole cultural stigmas that we have?
Okay, so the one of the things that we talked that we talked about is the lack of knowledge. So most mental health is very like a taboo still in our culture, where we just don't talk about it, where we just don't pay attention as we should. So we tend to have this lack of knowledge of what really mental health is. I feel like one of the big stigmas is that since we don't see it, it doesn't exist. So I like to focus a lot on letting people know the importance of mental health, because just like I said, just because it doesn't you can physically see it or touch it or hear it or anything, it's not there, but it is. And it's so basically preventing people from having that mentality, from repeating the mentality from our ancestors, from our grandparents, our parents, kind of stopping the cycle and getting to know more about it, educate ourselves.
Well, and let's talk a little bit about, the mentality of no me enseñaron, that we just kind of fall into the history of, that's not something that I was taught how to deal with. So then we just pass that on to our next generation. So what are your thoughts on that?
Right. I hear that that comment all the time. No me enseñaron, therefore I must not learn about it, which is completely wrong. But again, I think it has to do a lot with the education. It's something interesting about our brain is that it doesn't stop developing or it doesn't start growing until the day we die. So the fact that no me enseñaron, that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be like a stoplight for you to start learning about it. So I think one of the things that I want to focus on, and when it comes to self-awareness and mental health, is to let people know that they got to become also a little bit, I hate to saying this word, but it's a little bit egocentric and kind of like focus on yourself, because we tend to have this mentality where we say, our kids are first, my parents are first, my husband, my wife, they're first. And no, we need to take care of ourselves first. And so, si no me enseñaron, that doesn't mean I can't. I can't learn. I can't take care of myself first, because you got to take care of yourself first if you want the people that you love to be good. One example that I like to mention is that, for instance, when you go on an airplane, and then they start giving you instructions in case anything bad happens, is that they say, put your mask on first and then help the person next to you. I feel like we should be like that in mental health, or in to be stable, to be good, in order to help others. We can't take care of everybody else and then ourselves last, because especially with our kids, if you don't take care of yourself, then your kids are not going to be good. They're going to be best if you take care of yourself best. So that's where I'm kind of standing in that particular point.
That's such a important point, because I think in general, Latinos, we are really bad about, you know, focusing on ourselves, but also, like emotions and historical, you know, in most of our households, que si no te enseñaron, of what they didn't show you is to stop and think of, oh, maybe that actually bothered me. Maybe that was something that actually, did hurt my feelings, or something that I'm carrying with me longer than what I expected. And, in general, as immigrants and so many other things, we have so many different situations we have gone through that you can't just erase. So it is important to.
Right. One thing too is, when we were little, especially in my case, was, no te enojes, no te enojes. And getting mad, being angry, it's an emotion. It's part of humanity. So I think that's when the things one of the things that, when you mentioned earlier about no me enseñaron, okay, well, es que no te enseñaron how to get mad, because getting mad is part of life. We all have to get mad. We all have to get happy. We all have to, all these emotions. There's just a certain way that we can develop them, or we can get them out. And that's where I think, mental health comes in, and mental wellness comes in, where you have to learn how to get them out in the most appropriate way. So that way, you're good, and then you don't hurt anybody else that's around you.
That's such a good point there, because we're good about getting mad, but we don't know how to deal with those emotions and how they play out on other people. So that's absolutely, I couldn't agree more. So as we continue to talk about this, what do you feel some of the barriers are for accessing mental health care for Latinos?
Okay, so one of the, I guess the main thing is money. So obviously mental health, or going to therapy, is not the cheapest thing. But a lot of times, money aside, it's not the only barrier. I think judgment is, when it comes to, that famous phrase, "Oh, no estoy loco." I don't. It's being associated that, therapy. You just go to therapy whenever you're crazy, and we need to learn more about it, get to know more about what really therapy is, so that way that judgment kind of like gets away. I'm sorry, not it doesn't get in the way of you actually going to therapy and improving your mental health. Also, I think the language, especially here in Oklahoma City, there's not that many therapists that speak Spanish, so that's also a big barrier, especially with kids. Most kids have their own therapist, and they have no problem, communicating with the therapist, but the therapist communicating with the parent and being on the same page, it becomes very difficult, especially with culture and everything. So again, the therapist has a different culture, a different language, and trying to explain that to a parent to be on the same page becomes a huge barrier. I also feel that there's priorities when it comes to therapy.
Mm.
Again, we go back to the point where they say that if you can't see it, you can't touch it, there's not a problem, but there is a problem. So we tend to go with physical health as being more important than mental health, and I think they're equally as important. So it's trying to get the priorities straight, and I think we can, and I know we're going to be talking about it later on, how we can reach and how can we get those barriers out of the way, so that way we can actually reach mental health wellness and improve it in our community.
Yeah. And I actually recently was reading an article where they were saying that the lack of access to the language tends to discourage people from actually seeking more help or asking questions, because and I'll have to post that link for that one, but I think it also showed that most Latino household, they go and see a regular physician. So they, because they're not necessarily an expert in mental health, they almost want to try to ask them a question, but then they don't because the language, and then they never end up letting it out.
Right.
And then, just like somebody mentioned, then the idea that we can deal with it ourselves. That's very common in our community. We're like, hey, you're it's almost like you're broken, let's fix you, let's put you
Right.
back together. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of those barriers. But you mentioned money, and that's another thing that um we see it as maybe just los ricos, can go and get help, and we don't see it. We see it as like, oh, we don't need that. It's not a priority for us to spend the money or to prioritize it, like you said. But you mentioned there's a few different even health insurances that cover these things, don't they?
Yes, especially with children and kids under 18 years old. Most of them have Sooner Care. Sooner Care covers all of the therapies. And then one of the good things about Sooner Care as well is that they cover family therapy. Again, we're trying to focus on getting everybody on board, to have everybody on the same page. So a lot of people don't take advantage of that part of Sooner Care, which I hope everybody would. Nowadays, we do have a lot more turnout. So it's good because schools are getting more involved. Schools are taking this more serious. So they're automatically referring to therapy. And then again, so it's, if people can just go into their entrances and ask what is covered as far as mental health. And most of the time, almost all the insurance are covering mental health. Especially, like I said, Sooner Care. Sooner Care is a great way to get that started and get it rolling, especially when you can get the family involved in there as well, so that way we can all get some help.
So speaking of those services, so what can we do to educate our community more about mental health, specifically Latinos, because that's kind of what we are covering. But what are some ways that we can help educate our community about these resources?
Well, and that's a really good question, because there's so many ways that we could. For instance, there's social media, there's TV, there's radio. I wish we could make this like a talk of an everyday thing. I mentioned to you a couple of weeks ago that I wish we had, like, a radio, an hour on the radio, an hour on TV, or something that can motivate people and get people talking about mental health and the importance of mental health. um, I also wish that in churches they can talk a little bit more about it, and it doesn't have it, I feel like sometimes it's like a war between church and mental health, and it shouldn't be that. I mean, they should go hand on hand, because we are all in this. You know, when it's not just about a certain religion or a certain type of people that's going to have mental health illnesses. It's all, we're all in this. So I wish we could all just be in the same page and get more involved in, like I said, radio, TV, social media, just getting the word out that there's help out there. And even if, you know, going back to the money part, if there's no funds available, there's so many agencies that are willing to help people, just, you know, and if they don't have any funds at all, if there's no insurance or if there's no funds, I mean, there's help out there in so many ways.
Yeah. Well, in with that, I know that there's a few that are even within our city. The LCDA provides some sources, some resources. The organization NAMI has a ton of resources. I've been doing so much research lately on national organizations, and I will make sure and send you guys a lot of these links that we have. But there's a lot locally and then nationally that are focused on Latinos and then people of color. I actually saw some research on the NAMI page, and I will post that here in a second so you guys can go in there, do some research. There's a hotline, there's a texting line that if you need any kind of support. And then, you know, having, I think, a community like this where you feel comfortable with people talking about your own experiences really helps as well, because, you know, we sat there, what was it, like for 3 hours, Omero, just talking through coffee and mental health. And I think that that's the first steps that it takes us to kind of get there. But something I kind of wanted you to cover, because I feel like in general, everyone has this question, but I feel like even Latinos, help us understand what is the difference between mental health and mental illness, because I know that some people use them like intertwined, you know, like if it's the same thing, but I know it's not. So help us understand a little bit about that.
Okay, so I made some notes that way I wouldn't forget these two things because they're very, very important. So mental health is everyone has mental health, just like we have physical health. So it's the same thing, as just different parts. Like the World Health Organization, they said, they had this statement, which I found it very true. There's no health without mental health. So the mental health is just the well-being of ourselves. It includes kind of like the emotions, our thoughts, our feelings. That's basically what mental health is. Mental illness, on the other side, is just an illness that we have that's mental. It could be anxiety, it could be depression. One of the things about depression and anxiety is that it comes in so many ways. The spectrum is just huge. So the symptoms are not the same for everybody, and they're not going to be they're just going to be all over the place. So a lot of people, when they come into therapy, they think that depression is mainly just staying at home in bed and not wanting to get out. No, depression has many faces. And so that's just one illness. There's different challenges. So mental illness is it's basically challenges that we have mentally.
Well, I know there's so many that fall into each, but I love that, you know, you gave us those examples just to kind of visualize, because I do feel like even in general, we'll say, oh, I have so much anxiety. And we just say that lightly, but we don't even know what that means. You know, like there's such a deeper understanding with that, you know, and that's okay to use it. But I think that sometimes the lack of knowledge, the lack of communication, and I definitely want to bring up these points. One where they mentioned that another barrier or is the male figures, the male role models. That's something that definitely is big. And then educating the parents on symptoms of depression. And like you said, sometimes we don't know what to look for.
Mm-hmm.
So we're either just like it's just a moment, or maybe it's something that has happen because of a certain situation or something that, you know, they experience. So to that point, what do you recommend to parents on what are some symptoms they can be on the lookout for?
Okay. Well, before I get to that, let me mention something about since we talked about a little
Yeah,
bit of
go
mental
ahead.
illnesses. So in the top three mental illnesses that I would like people to get to become more aware of, and because it's like an everyday thing for almost all of us right now, it's so we have depression, anxiety, and stress. Those are the three top. Um, so I have like a little I just made this up real quick, and then in mental health, and one of the best things that you can do is it's to have a balance. If something is out of balance, it's kind of like the same thing, in physical health. If you don't have a balanced diet, if you don't exercise, there's going to be an imbalance in some way or the other, and then there's going to be an illness because of that. So same thing with mental health. Mental health, the key is to have a balance, and it's very hard. Nobody's perfect. We all, go all over the place sometimes, but to try to have a balance. So when it comes to the past, it's okay to think about the past, to kind of reminisce. It becomes a problem when we think too much about the past. When we think too much about the past, then it's going to lead to what we have is depression. Can everybody see it? I'm sure you can see it, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Same thing with the present. It's normal to kind of like think about the present. We have a lot going on. So this is when the balance is broken, when we're overthinking about the present, then it leads to what we all know as stress, right? Anybody
Yeah,
have
that is.
any? And then in the future, so again, it's okay to think about the future, to plan, but when we overdo it, when we let the mind just go without control, without a balance, then it leads to anxiety. Um, so we have those three things and what causes each of those. Okay. Now, the one thing is to realize you're going through that, but the most important thing is to learn what the stressors are. So whenever you're going through either one of those three, just kind of like, a lot of people say, okay, I'm going through depression. Let me just stop. I need to stop. No, let it go. I mean, let it go through. Have that depression that you're going through, have that anxiety, have that stress, but kind of be aware of what's causing it, the stress, or what's causing and that's how you're going to start learning more about yourself. And that's how you're actually going to get to a solution. Remember, the problem is already there. So stop wasting time trying to just give more attention to the problem and focus more on the stressor. Because once you get to know the stressor, it's kind of like an enemy. Once you start to know your enemy, you're going to figure out their moves, why they're doing it, when they're going to do it. So you got to become smarter at this when it comes to that. And a lot of times it's very difficult. But like I said, don't try to stop it. Whatever you're feeling, don't try to stop it. Feel it and then understand why you're feeling it, where it started, how long did it lasted, and where did it take you. Once you know those things, those keys, then you again to start focusing more on how to solve it. But a lot of people think that I shouldn't feel depressed. Yeah, I mean, it's like I always say this to my clients when an alcoholic comes in, and the worst thing I can tell them is stop drinking. I mean, first of all, they know they got to stop drinking, and that's why they're coming in. So I can't tell them to stop drinking. I just got to tell them why you're drinking, when do you drink, how much do you drink, trying to figure it out, trying to dissect the problem, basically. And then once you dissect the problem, then you'll be able to figure out, okay, this is the strategy I can take. And if that strategy fails, okay, then we're going to try another strategy. But we now have like a map of what's going on, like a roadmap kind of thing. Okay.
I I really like that example. I love the visuals too, by the way. Like I love that. I think you hit it right on target, like the stressors. Sometimes we do it to ourselves, without realizing that we're putting so much on ourselves. and and then, we're causing some of that. Not all of it, of course, but you don't realize that it's kind of adding on. So how do we stay aware of those?
Okay. So and again, it's just when something is not, it's out of balance. As soon as you know when something is out of balance, is you're not you're not a doctor and you're not a professional at this. So just when you feel something is out of balance, try to understand it. So it's don't try to fix it at the moment, because you're not going to be able. It's almost impossible to do it. But what it is possible to do is just to kind of like dig deeper into it. Um, when you mentioned earlier, well, a couple seconds ago, about holding things or carrying things. So I have this story that I always tell my clients on the first session. I thought I told you that, but I guess I didn't. Okay, so it's going to be a quick story. So this is a monk that was traveling with his assistant, and they were walking through a valley. Now, they were walking for some time, and then they come across this river. The river looks very, very deep and very wide. Well, the monk looks at the assistant. The assistant is like, okay, well, I guess we got to cross it. Right before they were going to cross it, this really fat lady comes along, like really, really, just a really big fat lady with a lot of luggage, so a lot of suitcases and everything. So the monk tells the assistant, okay, well, we got to help her. She needs help, and we got to help her. You carry the suitcases and everything. I'll carry her. They end up doing that. They cross the river. It takes them some time. And then they get to the other side safely. He puts the fat lady down, and the assistant gives her the luggage. Then the lady just kind of looks back at them and gives them this look like, ugh, and then she just takes off. Well, they keep on walking, and then after a couple minutes, the monk is noticing that the assistant is kind of like frustrated, angry, and finally stops and says, okay, what is your problem? The assistant is kind of like puzzling me, like, what do you mean, what's my problem? We carry her, you carry her, I carry all the luggage, and she didn't even thank us. She just gave us this look, and she just took off like nothing. And the monk said, well, yeah, you're right, but I stopped carrying her when we crossed the river. Apparently you're still carrying her. So in reality, where this is going is that we tend to carry a lot of gordas, a lot of fat, I call it, that really don't belong to us. I mean, the monk was able to say, you know what, I carry her, I did my job, and I try to help, and that's it. But I'm not going to carry, the fact that she didn't even thank us. And so a lot of times in life, we tend to own problems that we really shouldn't, that really don't belong to us, that if you really dissect the problem, you're going to realize that, hey, this is really not mine. This is not my problem. So I need to let it go. So I'm going to ask everybody to kind of like go to bed tonight and think about the gordas. What kind of gordas are you carrying that you shouldn't be carrying?
The only gordas we should be carrying are the ones we can eat.
I was going to say that. Yes.
That's a good way to put it, though, because I definitely think that we do tend to carry a lot of like, oh, they didn't do this at work, or at home, and sometimes, yeah, somos rencorosos. We do tend to carry that if somebody didn't thank us or acknowledge us, or we didn't get the promotion, or we didn't get the job, or my children were not, they weren't grateful for X, Y, and Z. So I definitely feel like a lot of people can relate to that example of the
I also feel like, and I use this example, my mom all the time, that she had a lot of kids, so she tends to worry a lot. We're a culture of worriers. We worry about everything, and even if everything is going smooth, we tend to worry, oh, there must be something wrong because everything's going smooth. So we got to kind of like change that mentality and understand that sometimes we have to let those things go, because worrying does not going to fix the problem. I tell my mom, if worrying about my brother, my sister, it's going to help them, I'll help you worry. But I know, and she gives me that look, but that really doesn't help, so that's a gorda that really we should not be carrying. And then moving kind of along, going back to your previous question about the signs. So as a parent, I feel like the most important signs that we need to notice about our kids is, first of all, we need to understand them. We need to figure out how they are, their personalities. And I know we have busy lives, we have a lot of things going on, but we made the commitment to having children, and part of that commitment or responsibility is to know them more than unfortunately than they know themselves, because they're at this stage where they don't know themselves. So as an adult, we need to figure out, okay, what's going on as far as anything out of the ordinary, anything. Having communication with them, constant communication, letting them know that you're there to help them as support. You're not two different teams, because I know sometimes it's very hard, especially with teenagers. It's very hard. But you need to understand that at this stage in life, teenagers, their brains are not fully developed, so they're very they just come up with whatever that's in their mouth. They don't really think through. They don't have that experience. So as an adults, I feel like we have the responsibility to kind of like oversee what's going on. Again, communication, as far as like, how did it go today in school? And don't settle for the first answer, it went okay, or I'm fine, don't worry about it. No, you know your kid better than anybody else, and you have the responsibility of trying to figure out what's going on in there. If there's some kind of change, some drastic change or minor change, you never know. So just need to look at for those things.
Awesome. And for those of you who maybe don't have children, this could be, your nieces, nephews, it could be your coworkers, it could be your students, if you're a teacher. These are different things that you could apply in those areas. And you just reminded me with that. I had just, again, I saw a picture where it's, a mom's asking the young girl who's sitting on the couch, like, our mentality as Latinos is like, ahora que tienes, now what's wrong with you? Like, instead of saying, hey, do you want to talk? Like, sometimes I think what we say can also have a lot of power and delivering. And so if your child or nephew, whoever is dealing with something, or they're holding something, the way you ask it or the way you approach it can also be a huge in that aspect, right?
Right, because you made me think of this. You have to get to know your audience, and that includes your, if in this case your kids. Just because you have 3 kids and they're all around the same age, you cannot talk to them the same way. If you want your message to get across, you kind of have to know them, their personalities, and tell them in a way that they would understand it. Because if you say the same thing to the 3 of them, I can guarantee you that the 3 of them are going to receive it in a very different way. They all have their own perception. Same thing with, with a coworker, with, again, a friend or another family member. You have to get to know your audience, know how they think. So that way, if you have a message to deliver to them, if you know them, you know how to approach it. And that way they receive it the way you want it to be received. Because, if you're just blunt about it and you just say things because you just want to say them, they're going to perceive it in their own way. So yes, understand what the message is and how to deliver it.
Well, that kind of leads me into the next point, which is, you kind of talked a little bit about this, but when it comes to, the challenges that Latinos face, you said a little bit about our spirituality and people kind of thinking that it can't work together. So I wanted you to elaborate a little bit more on when it comes to why is it such a challenge for us, to not think about mental health because of spirituality, and then our social expectations. It's almost expected that you should be able to handle it with only one, or instead of both of them, they only want us to deal with it one way.
Yes, as far as spirituality, it's kind of like, I guess, is how you perceive things, how you, when you go to church and when you go to a pastor or a priest or anything, I feel like sometimes you feel like you're the only one that's going through this, and you need to understand that everybody's going through some kind of mental illness. It's going to be a little bit or a lot. So try to think of, in this case, don't be egocentric, trying to open up your mind a little bit more. And as far as, the people that are in power, the people that are in charge, they should really kind of like focus more on the importance of mental health. So the way that are people that are they preaching to, they feel it's more accessible. I feel like this barrier, it's there, and, you can't be feeling like this, or you can't be thinking like this. That's not normal. No, I think we're in a stage in our lives where we have so much information, we have so many resources that we can go to, and I feel like especially churches that don't try to make it an enemy. And I'm not saying that they are, but it should be like a hand in hand kind of thing. Um, and we do have a lot of churches and a lot of religions that we kind of like help them out. They help us out because when they come into therapy, that's one of the things I tell them. You know what? I'm not going to judge you. I'm not here to tell you not to think about God. If people feel good, praying or to somebody or to a specific image, I'm fine with that. Whatever helps. It could go hand on hand. It doesn't have to be, no, you need to stop that, and then you need to think about what I'm going to tell you. No, they can go hand on hand. That's actually a better way to help the people, to help the person, because they have a disconnection with church or with the priest or with the pastor. Great, let's focus more on that, and let's use as a resource instead of as a barrier.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those of you who maybe have, and again, I think that's the point about that conversation there is we do tend to, in the Latino community, is like we just tend to say, go pray about it. You're going to be fine. Which, yes, we will pray about it.
Right.
We will make sure. But I think that sometimes it's going to take a little bit plus the prayer. And, we've grown up in a society where it's uncomfortable to talk about those things. And so while there are a lot of professionals, hopefully you're able to get that, counseling or whatnot. They do have services at a lot of different churches, but I feel like that's the conversation with Latinos, is that we think it's just gonna be a fix. Like if you go to a class, you're gonna get fixed. And I
Right.
think that's the part of the conversation we need to be more open to discussing with our parents, with our grandparents, with our, family members, like, hey, that's great that you're doing that, but you may need a little extra, like come with me and let's do this as a group. But there's they do play a role together. I love that you mentioned that.
Um, Sorry, did I interrupt you?
Oh, go ahead.
So remember we talked a little bit about this, and how important it is to. I always talk to parents and say, okay, we got to be on the same page. But a lot of times they're kind of resistant about it because they feel like I'm telling them that they're doing something wrong, and they feel that they're doing something wrong because the kid is
Yes.
doing something. And it's not about that. It's about just getting educated and telling them, hey, I'm not here to judge. The last thing that we do as therapists is judge. So I'm not here to judge. I'm just telling you, hey, what if we rewind everything back a little bit and try to figure out both how we can help this? Because, and I've mentioned to this too, I see them 1 hour a week. You have them the rest of the week. So the work has to be done outside of this office. You come in here for my tools. You don't come in here for me to tell you how to live your life. I kind of like share whatever I have learned that's going to help you. And if it doesn't work, we'll figure something else. But you're just picking up tools in here. You're not working. You're working outside of here, because in an hour it's very hard to improve. But you much information as you can within an hour, so that way you can implement it over there. And if it doesn't work, that's fine. It's normal. But bring it back and say, okay, let's do another trial. So it's focusing on people telling it. Just because something is wrong in the family doesn't mean that you have done something wrong, because the number one answer I get is, oh, hice lo mejor que pude, right? So as a parent, and I'm sure you did, but again, we need to figure out how we can help the individual. If it's going to be the parent first, educate them and how they can approach this, and then the student, that's fine. But we kind of have to be on the same page, and we kind of have to be open about it and be willing to work.
I love that. I love that, because it does have to be a little bit of work on everyone's part there. A little bit of both of them together. So going to that route of working together, but how can we cope better or improve our mental health with so much pressure from social media and everything else going on? What can we do to cope, Omero?
Okay, so one of the best things to do with cope, I'm gonna give you like a little lesson on on the brain, but it works.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have the brain. The top part of the brain is what we call the conscious part. The bottom part is the unconscious. So the conscious part is basically what deals with all those five senses: what we hear, what we see, what we touch. You know, the five senses. The unconscious is basically alert all the time because the conscious goes to sleep with you. And I kind of like to call that part the heart because we tend to do a lot of decision making with the hearts. The unconscious is the reason. And we all get this point in our lives when we do something when we're like, oh, shoot, I shouldn't have said that or I shouldn't have done that. That's basically the unconscious trying to like poke you and say, hey, this is going on. I've registered everything. I haven't been going to sleep since I was born, you know, kind of thing. So it's the best thing that we can do as humans is have those two connected, have those two on the same page, have those two communicate with each other. So one good way to do that is by writing. So if you have anything that's going on, just write it. It's going to make a lot more sense, I guarantee it, than if you're just thinking about it. Because a lot of times when we have a problem, we think about it, and then for some reason, because our brain just goes, you know, 1,000 miles an hour, it leads to another problem and another problem and another problem. And then, you know, we end up with the phrase, ya me hice bolas, yo tengo la cabeza hecho nudos, kind of thing, you know? So it's more about like focusing and being like aware of what's going on in your mind and the brain. So the best thing to do is to write about it. It doesn't have to be perfect sentences. It doesn't have to be a poem or nothing. Whatever it comes out, let it come out. And then once you see it, it's going to make a lot more sense than if you're just thinking about it. Okay. Now, after you've done this, just throw it away, burn it, rip it, whatever you want to do, because it has already helped you. And nobody needs to see that. That's your own that's your own personal life. So just whatever you do with it, whatever you write, just dump it or get rid of it.
Mhm.
That's one of the best ways that you can actually cope with whatever is going on. Another is, of course, you know, giving yourself some rest, sleeping. You know, you have to have some quality sleep. And I know it's very hard, especially in our adult lives when we have you know, so many things going on in our lives. It's very hard to have a quality sleep. But quality sleep, obviously, it's going to rest your brain and make it kind of like fresher, so it can receive a lot more the next day and move on with our lives. Um, Self-care. So self-care is either going to a spa, whatever is it that you like, not what other people think that you should like, is whatever you like. If it's, you know, a walk in the park, if it's a trip to Mexico City for 2 days,
I
do
think I
it.
know someone who just did that.
Do it. Like if that's what makes you happy, then do it. You know, just be as selfish as possible in that way. Of course, you have to have a balance. You know, you can just not going to be just you all the time. But you know, as far as self-care, be a little bit selfish. Take care of yourself in every way that you can. Staying active. Nature is one of the best things that you can do for mental health. So if it's going to be, you know, a walk, like I said, a walk in the park, a walk in the river, especially here in Oklahoma, it should be a lot easier because it's not as crowded. We have so many options that we can do for mental health to improve that. Social connection is very important. You kind of have to develop though this filter to how much social connection and the quality of the social connection. So if we can just dedicate a whole show to social connection, so I'm not going to go do that. And then communicating. So communicate with people you're close with. Communicate with whoever you feel comfortable with. We recommend going to a therapist a lot more. Why? Because you know, when we talk to friends, when we talk to family members, we tend to have this bias from them. They tend to fix our problems the way they think we should. And if we give, on the contrary, if you go to a therapist, you know, we give you options. You're making the ultimate decision. We're not fixing your life. We're just giving you options. We're kind of like opening up. I don't know if you remember, you know, from the rancho where the horses are kind of like, you know, going like this all the time. So that's kind of most people how they walk into therapy. So our job is to get that down and to open up the different ways that they can take it and have them take their own decision as far as what's best for them. So there's a lot of things that you can do to improve your mental health and to kind of be saying about it. You know, nobody's saying really, but
Well, yeah, no, I love those tips. So I hope everyone's writing these down of how to cope. But I really love that you said the writing part, because I feel like just for me personally, it's helped me throughout my life. I started writing like at a really, really young age in a diary. And so I look back at them and I'm like, wow, I don't know what I was thinking about that time. But, you know, for me personally, it has absolutely helped me. I love writing. And I feel like it helps me get some of those emotions out.
right. And then I also say, you know, nowadays, you really don't have access to a paper and a pencil like we should. So if you have your phone, you're with your phone all the time. Write it in your phone, write it in your notes. Once you're done, delete it. Nobody has to see it.
Mm,
And then that way you maintain your privacy, but you're able to take care of yourself. And
yeah.
again, the main reason for that is to have the unconscious and the conscious kind of like talk to each other and be on the same page about how you go about your whatever, if it's a problem or if you're just feeling sad, lonely, whatever, write it down, and I can guarantee you it's going to make more sense. It's not going to fix it. Remember, we have to figure out why first.
Mm, love it. Love it. Hope you guys, again, make sure you guys are taking notes, because I sure am. And there's a lot that you've covered. I mean, self-care is definitely so big. And sometimes just turning off our phones is enough. At least for me, sometimes I just have to be like, I'm disconnected today. Um, so since you've kind of alluded a little bit to this, and this is your specialty, you know, what is your advice to some of these parents who are having trouble, that are maybe listening to us today? What would you recommend to them, or what would your advice be for them?
Um, so as far as and like a specific advice is to have a plan of action. Um, and this is kind of like it's going to sound kind of weird, but I promise you I'm going to explain it. Don't be afraid of failure. I mean, you should make failure your friend. You should expect to fail. But if you have a plan of action, when in that plan of action, there should be several options for you in case you fail. I think we tend to be scared of failing, and that makes us not approach whatever we're trying to get, wherever we're trying to go to. So as parents, you know, you're going to fail. You can't be perfect. Everything is not going to be done right. So don't put so much pressure on making everything perfect or being the best parent ever. No, you know, you have to make a plan of action as far as like, okay, if this happens, these are the symptoms that I'm looking for. What can I do? If it doesn't work, okay, what else can I do? Again, the kids are the sponges. So you should have an advantage of that as far as like, okay, how am I going to reach him? You know your child better than anybody else. You know your friend, you know, okay, so I can't communicate the same way I normally do. I gotta figure out something else. So get to work, do a plan of action, and prepare yourself to fail. But again, that doesn't mean that you should just going to fail and leave it there. No, you know, there's got to be a lot more options. You got to be, you know, kind of hesitant to strive, but don't let failure kind of like be the stop sign that's going to stop everything.
Absolutely. So that is definitely something that you know, we don't think about, having a plan of action. Like, where do we go from here? So yeah, I hope that that resonates with some of our parents that are listening. But when we talk about now the younger Latinos who are currently managing life and careers, or, you know, going back to school and those kind of things, you know, so they can make a plan of action as well and be aware. Is there anything else for the young Latino professionals that you would mention?
Well, there's all these options available as far as resources, and then when it comes to school, when it comes to friends, there is the hotline that you talked about. There's help for all ages, where they can reach and have somebody listen to them. And I know nowadays it's very hard to get like an honest person to really listen to you. especially with social media being all over the place and having all these apps for everything. So as far as young people, they need to understand themselves first. They need to educate themselves as far as like, okay, what is it that I really want? And I know at this stage in life is really hard to have like the future set up, but to know what's around it, to know their surroundings, their resources, and what can they do in case something doesn't go well, or if I'm feeling this way, what is it I'm going to do? So again, yeah, we go back to the kind of like the plan of action is just to the biggest problem in therapy is because again we go like this, and that's because we don't have, we still have this on ourselves. So how do we get rid of that? And that's just educating ourselves, getting to know those resources again that we have all over the place and in many different ways. You don't want to talk to somebody in person, fine, there's somebody on the phone that's willing to listen. If you feel more comfortable going to somebody, if you feel more comfortable, also I see this a lot where you have nieces and nephews going to their uncles and aunts, and if you feel that you can't handle that as an aunt or as an uncle, then give them more resources. Don't just stop there and say, okay, well, they came to me, I must solve their problems. No, you don't. You would help them a lot more if you would give them more help, as far as like, hey, this is not really something I'm good at, or I can't help you this, but I'm going to help you get the help that you need. Not, and we feel like, I feel like, as Hispanics, we tend to just kind of like finish with the options part real quick. Like we have very small tolerance to options, and that's where we kind of like fail sometimes. And so having just more options, one of the best things about this country is that there's always a backup plan, a safety plan for everything. I wish we could implement that in our culture a lot more, because it's basically a safety plan in case we fail. Yeah. So and that's for everything. And I mean, everything that you can think of that you can buy, there's always a safety plan for that in case something goes wrong. So why don't we just implement that in our community, in our lives, in our culture a lot more? And I can guarantee you that our lives will be a lot smoother. It's not going to be perfect. Nobody's perfect. So it's just about making it more smooth.
Yeah. Snaps to that one. That kind of made me think of the two podcasts I heard today, and one of them was saying, sometimes we do have to go to someone that's neutral, like you just said. If I can't handle hearing that situation from my nieces or nephews, then maybe they do need to go to somebody who is neutral about the situation. And that can be for your career. Maybe your friends are not the ones to go to because they're not going to give you the constructive criticism, So for maybe the younger professionals, if you're dealing with something, you might need to go to somebody who's going to give you more advice that makes sense, but is making you self-aware of yourself as well, not just telling you what you want to hear. And then, some of us may have different scenarios that may change. So it could be looked at as a failure, or it could be just something that you just need to restructure your life and find out what is motivating you today. Maybe it's not what you thought your job was going to do for you. It's okay. It's okay to change it. It's totally fine. But having that sense of, flexibility there, I think is such a huge part. And I know we're kind of getting to the wrap up point, but I do want to have you tell us, how are you managing your own self-care and wellness through this current time?
I'm sure you know the answer to that. Well, you got to find out something that you're really passionate about, and I'm really passionate about traveling. Just the fact that I'm just at the waiting area or at the gate just gets me going and makes me happy. I think like one of the things that we should all look forward is to something that we're passionate about. Have that in our mind. If it's going to be a 2-day trip out of town or going to somewhere close or whatever, look forward to it. Make yourself excited about it. And that's going to make, I think, like your life easier. So feel kind of like put yourself in as far as in like, okay, what is it I'm going to do that's going to make me happy? And, if it's going to be a trip to the spa, if it's going to be a trip to the grocery store, I know right now is very difficult, but, allow yourself to enjoy the moment. Don't let that anxiety kick in. Just enjoy the moment, feel the present, because especially nowadays, it's crazy. We don't know if we're going to be here tomorrow or not. So if it's going to be by yourself, if it's going to be with somebody you love, your friends, whatever, do it. But, do it in a way that you're just going to make yourself think that it's going to fill that battery. It's going to charge that battery. It's not just going to be just another trip to the, like me traveling. It's not just going to be another trip to Mexico. No, I got to make something memorable. If it's in the plane, if it's in the, in the gate, if it's getting out of the plane, if it's over there, whatever it is, I got to make something out of it. I got to bring something out of it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I have to agree myself. It's been really hard going through, COVID and everything, because my passion is traveling too and getting out. And so it's been very difficult lately just being stuck in a situation. But I think it's also helping us value things more and see life a little bit different and finding other ways to cope until it's okay to just do like normal. But yeah, absolutely. Take care of yourselves, guys. So kind of wrapping up here, and then I want to maybe cover another question or two, but what is we've talked about a lot of things tonight, but our call to action tonight for everyone listening, and that will watch this later, what are the wrap up last 3 things that we want to remind everyone to do, and the call to action of what they're going to do after this?
Okay, so to wrap it up, let's see the. I don't know if anybody ever watched Adal Ramones, where it says "punto número uno." Okay, so the first thing I want everybody to get out of this is self-awareness. We have to be aware of ourselves. We have to know what is it that we want and why do we want it. So be as much self-awareness as you can with yourself, obviously with yourself, but like get to know yourself, like really know yourself, dissect yourself. Not literally, people. And then acceptance. I think a lot of times we have to accept that there is something that's not normal. There's an illness going on. Accept it and embrace it, so that way you can get to know it better, and then that way eventually get to know the stressors, and again then fix it. But accepting that we have something is one of the key points of moving on to the next step to how to solve it. And then the last thing I really want everybody to take home tonight is to let the gordas down. Let the gordas go. If they don't belong in you, if a lot of times they're going to be really big, let them go. Get them off and move on with your life. So think about those gordas tonight, not the ones.
I love that. I love that. So again, everyone, self-awareness, acceptance, and let the gordas go. Stop carrying all that unnecessary weight. And real quick, let me go back to this question before we finalize here. Okay, so what do you recommend to parents of young adults who no longer can get their medical records? I'm guessing there would be over 18 where they can, do their own thing, but where they're not aware of what's really going on.
Okay, so again, if you just go to an agency, if it's the LCDA, any agency, they will help you in any way possible. You don't have to have the specific insurance. You don't have to have any records. You just go out there and say, I need help with this. This is what's going on. And if they can't help you directly, I'm sure they're going to have. Every agency that I know has plenty of resources, as long as you go out and ask for help. So.
And Carmen, I think do you mean, does that answer your question, or do you mean as in if you don't know maybe what's going on in their life and they're not sharing it with you, or did that cover it? If you want to clarify.
I went ahead and unmuted myself.
Hello, yeah, everyone. Please.
I'm out in the community a lot. Definitely mental health is not my area. I focus myself in the food safety area. But anyways, I come across a lot of parents, a lot of, I work in the Latino community a lot more than I do in the American community because that's where my area of work is, in the South Side. And I just conversating with women and, you know, things like that. It just, after they open up to you a little bit or whatever, it's something that I see more and more. I don't know if it's because I'm a parent and I pay attention to those conversations a little bit more or what, but I've come across a few, and even close people to me, that have those young adults that are in the transition, of course, of being adults. And sometimes they kind of like part from you, and you're like, okay, now what's going on? I know they're growing up. I know they're trying to find their way. And unfortunately, they're over the age of 18 to where you really can't go to with them to the doctor or to a therapist or anything like that. Now, I do have friends who are going through that situation, and they're just trying to figure a way, how can you help as a parent, you know, of your young adult who is going through something. It can be something light, it could be something more severe, you don't know, but it's something. The question is, what as a parent can you do to help out?
Okay, that's an awesome question. Thank you, Carmen. But yeah, again, since you're the parent, you need to take advantage of this. And a lot of times the communication is very difficult, especially at that rough stage. So the communication doesn't necessarily have to be talking to them or asking them, hey, what's going on? Because more than likely the barrier is there and they're not going to answer. But, you know, if you can reach out to them in different ways, as far as in like, you know, leaving a little message, a little note or something to get their attention to say, hey, I'm here for you. It doesn't, like I said, it doesn't necessarily mean like, what's going on, ahora que tienes, or, you know, I'm here for you. If you don't say it, but if you say it in a different way, or even if you know a close friend or somewhere where like, hey, you know, just let them know I'm here for them. If the communication is not in the best place right now, there's all these ways that again, take advantage of of your knowledge of your kid. And if the communication is not there, say it in a different way. And like I said, it's not communicating as far as like talking. Do a note, do a little card, or send them a message. The point in here I'm trying to make is you have to make those kids think. So if normally you go up to them and say, hey, what's going on? And that's normally and that's the normal question, then they're obviously going to be like, whatever. But if you become a little bit more creative as far as like, you know, how to ask them the same question, then you're going to get them to think. Once you get them to think, that's where the kind of like the change is happening, and they'll start to perceive the message that you're trying to get in a different way. So try to get as creative as possible when it comes to trying to figure out what is it that they need or what is it that's going on.
Great. I just noticed a lot, just by the conversations that I've had with a few people, is just a lot of people don't have enough information to even recognize that something's going on. And I'm so glad you guys. I just want to say thank you to both of y'all, because this is great conversation. This is a great Zoom thing going on right now. And I'm just like, I'm interested in listening to all this, and I wish we could see more in the Latino community. Maybe I'm not involved that much because, of course, that's not my area, but it's great to have these kind of meetings going on for the Latino community as well.
Absolutely. Well, we thank you for joining us, because we definitely want to make sure we continue this, and we were hoping this is kind of a starter. There's so much of information that comes with this topic, and we haven't even dived into like this much of it. But we love that you guys are able to continue this and take this to other, you know, places, to take it back to your home, take it back to your friends, your communities, and let's continue to do more of it. And I think the key thing, I think, Homero, that you just mentioned is that listening is such a key factor. And we tend to be in a community that we just say a lot and we talk to each other like, haz esto, haz lo otro, haz esto, you know, but we don't tend to just listen. And so I think that that's kind of where this whole thing can get started. But again, great questions. So we'll try to continue to do this. As you guys show more interest, we'll try to see what we can focus on next month and try to deliver more of this to you all. But again, self-awareness, acceptance, and let the gordas go. And Homero, any last words before we head out?
Yes, when it comes to, I guess this is leading more into Carmen's questions too, is to get the message across, you have to really make it specific to that person. So try to really, really get to know your audience. It's kind of like, you know, she mentioned the food part. It's kind of like, think about it like if you go out to a conference and you say, well, you know, bad food is bad and cold food is good, or hot food is bad and cold food is bad. You know, it's very generic. You have to be more specific. You have to, as more specific you get in mental health, the more help you're going to get out of it, the more progress there's going to be. So really be specific about what is it that's going on. If it's within yourself, if it's, you know, within the loved ones that you have around it, be more specific and cater to them, cater to yourself, cater to them.
Yeah. And
services, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, and again, you know, feel free to reach out, of course, to Homero for more questions, for more thoughts. We definitely want to make sure that we get to answer all of your questions and thoughts. And if you think about something after this, feel free to message us. We will get Homero's email up as well and make sure that you can also contact him or number. But I definitely think that there needs to be more of this conversation. And after this, we will provide a link so that you guys can pass it on to other friends and family, because there's so many more stories that we would love to cover. I knew I wanted to touch on a few that you had mentioned to me, and there's just so much information. But we appreciate everyone's time, and we hope that you all can join us again next month for another conversation, and we'll try to find some creative way for that one to be specific to something that you want to hear. But thank you again, everyone, and hope you have a good night and take care of yourself tonight.
Yes, let the gordas go.
Yes.
I'm gonna hunt you.